Hello everybody, welcome to the year 2020. Depending on when you're watching this, I assume it's going to be in the year 2020, because 2020 starts tomorrow. Today is December 31st, 2019, and to end 2019, and welcome 2020, we're going to start a comparison series between the Monolith THX AAA Portable and the iFi Micro iDSD Black Label. Why? Because somebody asked me to do it. It's one of those requests on my channel, and it's a request that I have been waiting for quite a while. I haven't had a chance to get to it, so here we go. We're going to get to this actual comparison. We're going to break this off into at least 4 videos. The first video, today's, is going to be about the general overview, the similarities and dissimilarities between these products, what these products are really aimed for, and very generally the sound signature. After that, we're going to make a video about the bass, then about the mids, and then about the treble, just like I always do. We may do a 5th video with the conclusion, but we'll see how it goes. So let's just get into the comparison between these two devices. These two are portable amplifier DACs. Portable. There's nothing portable about the Micro iDSD. In fact, this is a misnomer. This is not micro. This, in comparison, is micro. The Monolith is more micro than the Micro is micro. This is insane. I don't understand what iFi thinks is micro. Their definition of the word micro is significantly different from the dictionary definition of micro. But theoretically, both of these devices can be used on the go, one more so than the other, obviously. Now, to try to put this into a comparison, a size comparison, here is the Mojo, okay? The Mojo is less than half the size of the Micro iDSD. The Mojo is, let me straighten this out here, probably an inch to an inch and a half smaller than the Monolith. All right? So just think about this for a moment. This and this. And actually, I should pull this back all the way here because that knob protrudes. Huge difference between size. This is a Cowan Plenu 1, P1. Cowan P1. Cowan makes some amazing digital audio players. This is one of those. This was discontinued a long time ago. This is the typical form factor of any digital audio player. Let's be honest. You know, kind of rectangular, a little bit of boxy nature going on there. You know, just sturdy stuff you can throw at your sister or your brother or a policeman and run away. Very similar to what the Monolith is. Very, very similar characteristic, at least in size and shape. The iFi, on the other hand, I don't imagine that anyone is really going to put rubber band around this combo and walk around with it. I mean, you could, but I think that you might be stopped for carrying a bomb, because this thing will have wires coming out all different ways, and it's going to look like you're carrying something very nasty that might explode on you. This is not a portable solution. This is the Calyx. I almost said Cayin. I did say Cayin. This is the Calyx M, a discontinued portable digital audio player. This, too, is fairly similar to the Monolith. Not so much with the iFi. You have the FIO M11, which is very similar to this size comparison. And I have the M11 here somewhere, and I don't remember where I put it. This is the Opus number 2. This is not the typical DAP size. It's a little bit wider than a normal DAP. In length, I guess, in toneless, it's about the same, but in width, it's a little bit wider than a normal digital audio player. But even this, with the Monolith, seems to kind of look a little bit more the part than the iFi, which doesn't. So we can play this game all day long. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, one is obviously less portable than the other. Oops. Oh no. Contact. Why? Well, I think that goes into the different reasons these devices were created. I think that the iFi is an exceptionally powerful device with all sorts of wonderful connections that you may never, ever use. All sorts of wonderful features that may never become relevant to you. But the same can be said for the Monolith. Now, the Monolith has two USB ports, one for charging, one for data. They're micro USB. It's got an optical and line in, and it's got a headphone out. The optical line is 3.5 millimeter. The headphone is also 3.5 millimeter. It's got this wonderful knob, and it has 4 buttons on the side. There's the menu button, there's the enter input button, and then there's the up and down button. All menu functions are controlled with these 4 buttons on the side. This is probably the worst part of the whole, user interface, because I don't think that these buttons are particularly intuitive to use. You turn on the device by switching on, by turning the knob just once, and then you have this LED that lights up, and it's ready to go. You get your battery indicator, you get your connection option, you get USB PCM, which is what this was last on. You get the volume number, and right now it's on mute, and then you increase, and as you start turning the knob, you get to see that the volume indicator is actually changing. It goes all the way from negative 60 decibels to plus whatever, and I thought it was plus 16. That's very loud. Now, it's 1-step increments from negative 60 to negative 20. Starting at negative 20, it goes in half-step increments. So 18, 17.5, 16 and a half, 16, 15 and a half, 15, so on and so forth. The response is incredibly fast. The moment that you start turning, the numbers start changing. Very incredibly smooth and accurate. That turning of that knob is the smoothest I have. I mean, the iFi has a very smooth knob, but I think the Monolith takes the cake. I think it really is the smoother of the two. You enter into the menu by just pressing the menu button. Then you get into EQ, DRC, direct, sense around, and then the other settings involved. If you want to go into the settings or into the other features, you hit the enter button, and then you navigate up and down again until you get to the menu screen that you really want to address. Now, that's it. There's nothing more to this. The EQ setting is for changing the EQ on the frequency range. So if you want to boost, say, the sub bass or the bass, you can do that in here. You can't really do that on the iFi. So you have much more fine-tuned control over your EQ possibilities on the Monolith. You also have settings that you can actually save on the Monolith with your EQ. In comparison, the iFi has connections galore, and it has buttons and switches. This is a tactile-only unit, whereas this is tactile and digital with that menu system. On the front, you have a 1/4-inch headphone out. There's only one other portable device that I know of that has a 1/4-inch out, and that is the X-Duo XD05. It has a bass boost on and off. That's it. There's no middle ground. You have a 3.5 millimeter input. There's a 3D effect on or off. That's it. No middle ground. You get a knob that also turns on the device, and when it turns on, you see this green LED light up here. Very, very smooth, but not quite as smooth as the Monolith. Still very nice. It doesn't wobble, it doesn't shake, it doesn't feel cheap. This is metal, this is metal, this is metal, everything is metal. On the back, you have SPDIF in and out, and you have your RCA left and right channels. Output. You have your digital input. Now, this is not a standard USB input. The iFi actually comes with a special cable, and you use one end to go in here, and the other end is a standard USB-A jack. You charge the device with a different port, USB, On the bottom, you also have additional functionality. You have preamplifier or direct. So if you want to use this for your speakers, you can just switch to the preamplifier mode. Otherwise, keep it on direct if you want to use as headphone amplifier. On the side, you have power mode. There is turbo, which provides 4 watts of power at 16 ohms. Tremendous, if you ask me. Normal. And then you have eco. Now, eco is supposed to be for IEMs. If you're going to listen to IEMs, do it on eco. Do not use turbo. Do not use normal. iFi tells you that repeatedly, and I would believe them. You also have the option to switch polarity on your headphones. So you can do positive, which is normal. You can go negative. You can switch it. Why anybody would really want to do that, I don't know. I suspect that if you want to test your headphones or your signal, that would be useful in a professional environment. But for normal people, I don't know why you would want to do that. I don't hear any difference when I've switched it back and forth. So take it as it is. The one caveat is that you can't use that with the 3.5mm in. You can only use it with your digital in. So once it's connected to your computer, for example, you can switch the polarity. If it's not connected to your computer, the polarity switching does nothing. Then you also have some filter options. The only filters you have are bit perfect, minimum phase, and then standard. You can play around with those and see if you hear any difference at all. And then finally, you have IE match. There's the offsetting, high sensitivity, and ultra sensitivity. Now, I don't exactly know what the difference is between high and ultra sensitivity, but these are really, this setting is only for in-ear monitors. I would say that anything around 8 ohms and less is probably ultra sensitivity, I'm guessing. And anything above 8 ohms is high sensitivity, I guess. But the user manual for this, for the iFi, doesn't really define what high sensitivity is, and I don't see anything really on their website that would put real numbers to it. I saw something referenced to less than 4 ohms and something else that referred to less than 1 ohm, but I have no idea what they're talking about. Maybe I missed it. Other than that, there are more differences between these two devices, not just the connection, not just the menu options or the lack thereof. The internals of these devices could not be more different. The Monolith has an AKM chipset for its DAC. In fact, it uses the AKM 4493 DAC. Very clean, very clear. Now combine that with the AAA THX amplifier module, and it, again, very noiseless, no hiss, no distortion, very crystal clean. But that's the same with the iFi. You shouldn't get the impression that the iFi has distortion that the Monolith does not. Neither of these two has distortion or hiss. There's no noise that I can hear from either device. It's just different uses of the internals. The iFi uses Burr Brown chipsets for its DAC, and the actual chipset, if I can find it real quick online, it's a dual Burr Brown chipset. And I'm not quite sure which chipset they're actually using. There's even more differences between the two, because one has a more clear, clean, analytical sound signature, whereas the iFi has a bit more bass emphasis, even with the bass effect turned off. It's a thicker sounding amplifier, meaning it sounds a lot like the Mojo, in my opinion, because I've done the test back and forth. The iFi has a bass boost, a slight roll off in the treble, a tiny increase in the mids, but the mids and the bass do interact a little bit. Not so much as the Mojo, but certainly enough to lose some detail in the mix. Whereas with the Monolith, that doesn't really happen. The Monolith has great separation from the entire frequency range, from the bass to the mids, from the mids to the treble, from the mids from the bass, and the bass from the treble. I mean, everything is well separated. Then, on top of that, you have the different file formats that these two devices support. Now, both support DSD and standard PCM, obviously. But the iFi goes up to DSD 512, whereas the Monolith only goes up to DSD 128. And I'd say only. I mean, I don't know if you can really hear the difference between 128 DSD and 512 DSD, but you have the option of going to 512 with the iFi. Both of these devices are extremely powerful. Even with all the features, you can get anywhere between 6 to 10 hours of playback, of use from the iFi. Now the 6 hours is more for the turbo mode. Frankly, with the turbo mode on, and depending on where you are on the volume setting here, you should expect to get about 4 hours of battery. Whereas with the Monolith, I tend to get between 6 and 7 hours of continuous use. The more you use these devices, the more you recharge them, the more the battery is going to drain faster, and then the less life they'll have. But that's just true for every single battery-operated device. Now, in the past, I've showed you how to replace the battery on the Mojo. It's fairly easily done. There's no way to replace the battery on either of these devices. So you should have to send these in for a professional battery replacement if it's offered. iFi might offer that. I don't think Monolith offers any such battery replacement. So just keep that in mind if you are considering to use either of these devices for long periods of time, knowing that, yes, your batteries are going to die and drain fairly quickly given sufficient time. Now, the bottom line question, why are these devices in production, right? Who are these for? Well, I think that they're for different subsets of professionals and different subsets of casual audiophiles. Now, there is a professional out there that wants all the connections on the go. That's what this device is for. You can rock out to your speakers if you want. You can use for digital input. You can use for analog input if you want that. You have very simple interface with knobs and switches that just sound amazing, tactile. You've got all the filters and all the stuff that you could ever really want in a portable device, and it's extremely powerful on top of that. In fact, this is the most powerful portable amplifier that I know of. 4 watts at 16 ohms on turbo mode. On the other hand, you've got the Monolith, which provides arguably cleaner, more accurate sound signature, better separation of instruments, better separation of vocalists, better separation of the frequency range in total. And it has EQ functionality that is really non-existent in the iFi. You can't control EQ on this. The only way to control EQ is by selecting the bass boost or the 3D effect filters. But you're not actually dialing anything in. It's pre-selected for you. You're just turning it on or off. Whereas with the Monolith, you can fine-tune that EQ parameter significantly. So if you have a portable device that does not have EQ, then the Monolith would be the better choice of the two because you can, in fact, control your EQ, whereas on the iFi, you can't. So that's the subset of professional. Now, the subset for casual listeners, I think, is slightly different, which is, I think both devices sound exceptionally good for what they are. The iFi has a more pleasant analog sound signature, a bit thicker to say. Now, what do I mean by that? As I've said just previously, a boost in the bass, roll off in the treble, slight melding of the bass and the mids, a very pleasant sound signature. Slightly closed off, whereas in comparison, the Monolith sounds a little bit wider, cleaner separation of all the frequency ranges, no melding, no muddiness. There's a bit of muddiness that the iFi brings out, and slightly more detail out of the Monolith. Now pick whichever sound signature you like. Now, the price difference is obviously going to be a huge contributing factor in your decision. $600 versus $300. For half the price, you get a different sound signature. You get some features that the iFi simply doesn't have. But for $300 more, you get substantially more power, selection for headphone and IEM use, filters that are dead simple to use, and fantastic build quality. But the build quality on the Monolith is also fantastic. Ultimately, when you're deciding between these two, and if you are really stuck between these two, you're not talking about just the size and the power difference, but you're talking about sonic differences that these two have. These are not the same at all. More different these two could not be. The only way to make these more different is if the iFi, required a power brick at all times. That would be the only way these two devices could be more different. Other than that, because that's not the case, this is as different as you can possibly get in a group of comparison, meaning they're both portable devices, they're both amplifiers and DACs, but they're both vastly different from each other. And that's a good place to be, depending on what your particular needs happen to be. In the next video, we're going to talk about the bass. We're going to hook these up to an A/B switch. We're going to start playing some music, and we're going to talk about how the sound actually compares between these two devices. We're going to start with the bass, then we're going to go to the mids, and then eventually the treble in the upcoming videos. I hope that this has been of some help. If you are watching this and you enjoy this sort of content, please consider donating a couple of bucks to me on Patreon. For the price of one coffee from Starbucks per month, you could help me save money so that I can buy new and old products to thoroughly review for you. I hope all of you have a fantastic end to your 2019 and a wonderful beginning to 2020. And I hope that each and every single one of you has a peaceful, wonderful 2020. Take care.